over added. The reason I'm demoing the monitoring, even though monitoring itself isn't that interesting, is just because the steps to set this up are quite involved. So what I wanted to monitor was the connection pool usage to our Postgres databases. And GitLab has 3 ways you can connect to a Postgres database. First of all, there's the main one, which is used for the application by default. So any sort of standard install of GitLab will at least have one, what we can call active record base connection. For Geo, on the secondary nodes, we have this tracking database using a foreign data wrapper. You can see I've got Geo set up here and I'm on a secondary node. There's nothing to sync because I don't need anything to sync for what I'm doing here. And then finally, there's a feature we have which is called database load balancing, where you can add secondary database servers to handle some HTTP requests. If those HTTP requests only perform reads, so as soon as an HTTP request performs a write, it goes to the primary. But as long as it's only performing reads from the database, it will go to the secondaries, and it will just be balanced between those. So to set this up, obviously I need to set up Geo. Once you've got Geo set up, setting up database load balancing is fairly trivial because Geo requires at least one database replica. So you can just point the load balancing host to the other database node to the one you're using, and you've got some load balancing set up. That's not necessarily what you should do, but for testing it, that's totally fine. So yeah, here I'm on the secondary node. This is the Prometheus install for the secondary node, so this should have everything available. I'm going to look at the connection pool busy stats. The graph's not super interesting because I just started this just before this demo, but you can see that we have values for active record base, which is the main connection on Sidekick and the 2 Puma threads. We have geo-tracking base in the same places, and we also have database load balancing hosts on the Puma threads only, because like I mentioned, it's not used in Sidekick. The reason that the labels have the class and the host is because the class is useful for people wanting to know what the connection is, and the host is useful for disambiguation. So active record base can be different on GitLab.com on our web and Sidekick nodes, and obviously database load balancing can have multiple hosts. So if I had a couple more hosts set up here, the only way I would be able to disambiguate those is by the host value. These are using IPs here because that's what I'm using, but if they were using domain, if they were using names, then they would be using names. And the other thing there is the cardinality shouldn't be too bad because there's only so many database load balancing hosts you can have, and class can only be one of these 3 things. So that's my demo.